Hello everyone, we're back for another look at our paper mache magical beasts. By now, hopefully you've gone through and watched videos 1 through 4. You've learned all about the art of Walter Anderson. You've learned about shape and form and gesture. You've learned how to build an armature out of aluminum foil. And then you've learned how to go ahead and paper mache it and listen to a story while you did apply your paper mache. Now we're going to kind of just check in and look at our work before the very final step, which will be painting or decorating our sculpture. Okie dokie, this is my sculpture so far, one that I've done. Notice that it's pretty big and it's pretty solidly paper mache overall. I've done 2 coats of paper mache that I've applied to it, and to this one, the other armature that I had a slightly different pose for this sculpture. I don't know how well you can see it in the video, but there it is. I'll turn it around so you can kind of get the idea. There we go. This is the second sculpture, and this also has 2 coats of paper mache. This is my magical swan that I'm making. Now, people sometimes run into trouble paper macheing. It can really be tricky. I'm not going to lie to you. And let's go over some common problems you might have run into while you were applying your paper mache and how you could solve them. The first complaint is, it doesn't stick. How can I fix it? If it doesn't stick, there might be a couple of reasons. Number 1, did you really wet your paper mache enough? Number 2, did you really, when you put it onto your animal, squeeze it and apply it really hard? Remember, you can't just drape it on there. You've got to really press it in. That's very important to help it stick. The third trick to help it really stick is you have to weave and overlap your pieces. If you put a piece here and a piece here and a piece over here, it's just not going to work so well. So working from one area to another, pressing hard, making sure your paper mache is wet enough that you've dipped your newspaper evenly in your solution before you applied it, that usually helps with that problem as well. Okay, troubleshooting problem the second. Little bits and pieces of the paper keep peeling up no matter how hard I try. Usually this happens when you don't have your piece of paper, the paper strip that you're using, evenly wet. Sometimes we'll tend to use our finger, dip it in our paper mache solution, wet just section, but we'll forget the other end of the section. So the piece is kind of unevenly wet, and then, well, you do run into troubles where sometimes it doesn't stick so evenly. You have to make sure it's completely wet. The third problem that people run into, well, I started putting on my paper mache, but my sculpture's now all goopy and flopping around. That can really be a problem. You want your sculpture to be nice and upright. But the fact is, when you apply the paper mache, it is going to get kind of wobbly, just a little bit on you. It shouldn't completely fall apart or fall over or anything. But it will sometimes shift around a little bit as you're working on that first coat especially. If that happens, you might want to make sure that you don't have too much paper mache solution, that 1/2 water, 1/2 glue solution, on the piece of paper that you're using. Sometimes that can cause problems for you if you're not being careful. So you want to make sure that you have just enough solution, not too much, not too little. I'm going to put this paper in the cup and show you, see how drippy this is? This is just too much solution. I've got to take my hands and I've got to remove the excess like that, and then make sure I get the little corner that my fingers were holding. This piece here, it's wet evenly through, but it's not dripping. That's what you want to make sure that you have. Another thing that you want to make sure that you have is that your sculpture still is stable. After you set it out in the sun, make sure it's nice and stable. If I pick up a little plastic lid, I can place my sculpture on it nicely and make sure that it is standing there. It's not falling. Oh, that one just fell over because I tilted the little lid. But you want to make sure it's nice and it's stable and it's not rocking all over the place. That's my first one. This is my second one. And you also want to make sure that once you've gone ahead and you have applied your paper mache, that you've gotten all of the spots covered. I discovered when I was working on this sculpture right here that actually I had a couple little spots that I missed. So I'm going to go ahead, here's a little spot I noticed I missed right back here. So I'm going to go ahead and put a couple of pieces of white paper mache, white paper dipped in paper mache to just tidy up those little spots. So you want to make sure that your sculpture is nice and sturdy, the paper's not coming off, that you've completely covered your sculpture with 2 full coats. It's a really good idea between coats of paper mache to take your sculpture out and to let it dry in the sun. If you do that, it'll dry super quick, and then you can go and put your second coat on, and then you'll be ready to apply color and to decorate it. And that's going to be the next step and the next video. So if you've run into some problems, go back and fix them, add that other coat of paper mache. And remember, folks, artwork takes time and it takes some work. Don't expect it just to be really quick, done in a snap. Sometimes you got to work at it and have some patience. So make sure you practice those good skills, and you're going to have a really cool sculpture by the time you're finished. Alrighty, get back to work, and I'll see you in the next video where we talk about how to apply color and paint, or some kind of color, to our sculptures.